I want you to picture a hill in Shaanxi province, China. We're standing at the Kenling Mausoleum. It's this sprawling imperial complex, the kind of place that's really designed to make you feel very, very small.
It is. You walk up this long path, the Spirit Way, and you're flanked by these massive stone statues. You've got officials, mythical beasts, winged horses. It's all very intimidating.
And right there, standing guard, is a monument that you physically cannot miss it. It's a monolith.
It really is overwhelming. It's a single piece of limestone standing over 6 meters tall. That's what, about 20 feet high. It weighs nearly 100 metric tons.
Wow.
And usually when you see a stone tablet like this in an imperial Chinese tomb, it is busy.
Busy how? Like visually cluttered?
I mean, every single square inch is usually carved. You'd expect inscriptions, flowery poems, detailed lists of battles won, economic achievements, celestial omens that supposedly prove their right to rule.
It's basically a resume.
It's propaganda for the afterlife. A resume carved in stone, designed to tell the gods and future historians just how magnificent the deceased ruler was.
But you stand in front of this specific stone, and there's just nothing.
Nothing. It is the wordless still. No eulogy, no list of deeds, just blank stone, weathered by 13 centuries of wind and rain.
Which is incredibly eerie.
Yeah.
Because the person buried there isn't some minor figure who was forgotten or, some disgraced prince who was erased from the record.
Not at all. We are talking about Wu Zetian.
One of the most titanically important figures in all of Asian history.
Absolutely. And to understand the silence of that stone, you really have to understand the noise she made while she was alive. Because Wu Zetian holds a title that, well, technically it shouldn't exist.
We need to parse this right at the start, because I think most people, especially in the West, know her generally as the Empress of China.
Right.
But that English title is actually a bit misleading, isn't it? It implies she was just the wife.
It is very misleading. In Chinese history, you have the term Hu. That's an empress consort, the primary wife of the emperor. You have plenty of those.
Okay.
Then you have empress dowagers, the mothers of emperors. They can have immense influence, sure, usually ruling as a regent through a young son. But Wu Zetian was Huangdi.
Which is the term for the emperor himself.
Exactly. Huangdi is usually translated as emperor, but the implication is something closer to supreme deity. It is a masculine noun. It is a role that structurally, philosophically, and religiously was designed to be held only by a man.
So for, 2,000 years of imperial history, it was a no girls allowed clubhouse.
That's a great way to put it. The entire bureaucracy, the Confucian rites, the mandate of heaven itself, everything was set up to prevent a woman from holding that specific title.
And she didn't just rule as a regent for a young son, essentially keeping the seat warm until he came of age.
No, not at all. She eventually brushed her sons aside, established her own dynasty. She declared the Tang dynasty over and founded the Wu Zhou. She is the only female sovereign in all of Chinese history to rule in her own right.
So the blank stone. Is that an insult from the men who came after her? Do they just refuse to acknowledge her? Or was it a boast from her?
That is the mystery we are trying to solve today. The traditional historians, the Confucian scholars who wrote the books after she died, they painted her as a caricature.
The Dragon Lady.
The Dragon Lady, the ruthless usurper, the hen that crowed at dawn, which was a common Confucian insult meaning a woman in power is an offense against nature, like a hen trying to act like a rooster.
But we have a stack of sources here. Modern scholarship, translations from the Old Book of Tang, and recent archaeological analysis that paint a much, much more complex picture.
Right. We're trying to move past the cartoon villain. We need to find out. Was she a tyrant who murdered her own children to get to the top?
Or was she a visionary CEO who professionalized the bureaucracy, expanded the empire, and broke the power of a stagnant aristocracy?
Or, and this is the scary thought, was she both?
Let's get into it. Part 1, the Lion Stallion.
To understand Wu, you have to look at where she came from. She was born around 624. Now, usually, emperors or high-ranking consorts came from the old, entrenched military aristocracy. These were families with deep roots.
Old money.
Very old money. But Wu's father was a timber merchant.
So new money.
Exactly. He made a fortune and became a close ally of the founder of the Tang dynasty, so he was rewarded with a title. But they weren't part of that deep-rooted blue blood aristocracy that ran the country, and that chip on her shoulder is important later.
And her education was unusual, right? I read that she wasn't just taught embroidery and how to manage a household.
Far from it. Most girls, even in wealthy families, were taught domestic skills to prepare them for marriage. Wu's parents, however, encouraged her to read, to write, to study politics, history, and music. She was literate and sharp long before she ever set foot in the palace.
And there's this great story about her leaving home. She's only 14 years old, and she's been selected to enter the palace as a concubine for Emperor Taizong. That's the current emperor.
A huge honor, but also terrifying.
Right. And her mother, Lady Yang, is weeping, acting like she's being sent to a funeral.
Which, in a way, she was. Entering the palace usually meant you never saw your family again. You became property of the emperor, just one of thousands of women in the harem. It was a gilded cage.
But Wu just looks at her crying mother and says something like, "How do you know that it is not my fortune to meet the Son of Heaven?"
Ambition right from the very start. She wasn't going there to serve, she was going there to succeed.
But she doesn't start at the top. She enters the palace as a Karen, a talented lady. What does that rank actually mean?
It's a mid-tier rank. It sounds nice, but she's essentially a glorified secretary. She's managing the emperor's wardrobe, maybe his library. She has access, but she doesn't have status.
But she didn't stay unnoticed for long. And to really understand how she ended up on the throne, we have to look at her origin story. And there was one anecdote that Wu Zetian actually told about herself late in her life that I feel is the skeleton key to her entire psychology.
The lion stallion.
This is a famous story, but I want to scrutinize it because, honestly, it sounds almost too cinematic to be true.
It does, but I think the fact that she told it about herself matters more than if it literally happened word for word.
Okay, set the scene for us.
The setting is the imperial stables. The emperor at the time is Taizong, a renowned warrior. He has this magnificent horse, the lion stallion, but it's completely untamable. Psychotic, it bucks off the best generals in the army, and no one can ride it.
And Wu is, what, a teenager at this point? A low-level consort?
She's very young, a low-ranking concubine. She's essentially invisible in the court hierarchy, but she steps forward in front of the emperor and his whole entourage and says, "I can tame this animal, but I need 3 items."
That's a bold opening line for an intern speaking to the CEO.
Incredibly bold. The emperor is amused, so he asks what she needs. And she asks for an iron whip, an iron hammer, and a dagger.
Okay, hold on. I know a little bit about horse training. You use a carrot, you use a soft brush, you build trust, you do not ask for a hammer.
Wu wasn't interested in whispering to the horse. Her method was a pure, cold algorithm of escalation.
An algorithm.
Yes. Step 1. Whip the horse with the iron lash. Demand submission through pain. If it doesn't submit.
And if the horse keeps bucking, which it probably will.
Step 2. You take the iron hammer and you smash it in the head.
Which, surely that kills the horse.
Yeah.
Or at least gives it permanent brain damage.
It creates a massive concussion, certainly. It's meant to break its will completely. But if the horse still refuses to submit...
There's a step 3.
Step 3. You use the dagger to slit its throat.
So the logic is, submit or die. There's no middle ground. There's no negotiation.
Precisely. And look at the reaction from the emperor. Taizong was a warrior. I mean, this is a guy who killed his own brothers in an ambush to get the throne. He respected strength. But even he was a little disturbed by this.
It was too much for him.
It was almost too ruthless. The sources say he praised her bravery, but he never promoted her. He kept her at a distance after that. It was like he saw something in her that was a little too cold, even for him.
So why on earth would she tell this story about herself decades later when she was in power? It makes her sound like a monster.
Because by the time she told it, she was the Empress, ruling a court full of ambitious, scheming men. She wasn't telling a funny anecdote about her youth. She was giving a warning.
Mission statement.
Exactly. She was telling her ministers, "I am the woman who will kill the horse if it doesn't listen. Do not test me. This is how I operate."
So she has the will, but she doesn't have the power yet. And then, tragedy or, from her perspective, opportunity strikes. Emperor Taizong dies in 649.
And the rule was very strict. If you were a concubine and you didn't have any children with the deceased emperor, you were shipped off.
No exception.
None. She was sent to Ganye Temple to become a Buddhist nun. Shaved head, simple robes, chanting scriptures for the rest of her life. That was supposed to be the end of Wu Zhou. She was supposed to fade into history.
But of course she didn't, because she had made a connection with the new emperor, Taizong's son, Gaozong.
Right. While his father was still alive, Wu and the young prince Gaozong had, let's just say, a moment. There was a spark. He was drawn to her.
And he remembered her.
He did. On the anniversary of his father's death, Gaozong goes to the temple to offer incense. and he sees Wu there in her nun's robes. The story goes that they both wept. It's all very dramatic.
And this is where the palace drama really kicks into high gear, because Gaozong's wife, Empress Wang, sees this interaction. Now, you'd think the wife would be jealous and want this nun kept as far away as possible.
That would be the logical reaction.
But she actually arranges to bring Wu back to the palace. Why on earth would she do that?
It's the classic enemy of my enemy is my friend blunder. A fatal one.
Explain that. Who is she fighting?
Empress Wang was locked in a bitter rivalry for the emperor's affection with a different woman, the pure consort Xiao. Wang was losing that fight, so she thought, if I bring this beautiful former concubine of my husband's father back, she'll distract the emperor from Xiao.
Okay, I can see the logic, I guess.
And her thinking was, Wu is a former lowly nun who owes me everything. She'll be my loyal pawn.
Oh, Empress Wang, you made a huge mistake.
A catastrophic one. Wu returns to the palace, and she is sharper, she is hungrier, and she is far more experienced in the ways of power than either of them. She very quickly becomes the emperor's favorite.
And this leads us to probably the darkest and most debated accusation against your entire life. Part 2, the path to Empress blood and accusations.
The infant daughter incident. And we really do need to get into the weeds here, because for many people, this is the moment where she crosses the line from ambitious to monstrous.
So the year is 654. Wu has given birth to a daughter with Emperor Gaozong.
Yes. A baby girl. Empress Wang, who is still the official empress but is losing favor fast, comes to visit the nursery to see the new baby.
A political courtesy, basically.
Right, look, we're all one big happy family.
The story goes that after Wang leaves, Wu goes into the room. She finds her baby daughter dead, strangled. And Wu immediately accuses Empress Wang of murder.
She does. She points out that Wang was the last one seen near the room. Wang had no alibi. The Emperor, Gaozong, who was already drifting away from Wang and completely infatuated with Wu, believed it instantly. He was furious. He wanted to depose Wang right then and there.
But the big historical question, the ultimate cold case is, did Empress Wang actually do it? Or did Wu Zetian kill her own baby to frame the Empress?
It is one of the most debated and unknowable moments in Chinese history. Traditional historians who already disliked Wu for being a woman in power flat out say she did it. They use it as the ultimate proof of her monstrous ambition, that she would sacrifice her own flesh and blood for the throne.
But looking at it with modern eyes, is there any actual evidence for that? Or is it just a convenient story for her enemies?
There is zero forensic evidence, and modern historians look at this with a lot more skepticism. We have to remember the environment. These palaces, they were drafty, they were damp, and they were heated by open coal braziers.
So it could have been accidental.
Absolutely. It could have been what we now call crib death, or SIDs. It could have been carbon monoxide poisoning from the faulty heating system, which was very common.
Or, Empress Wang might have actually done it.
Or Wang actually did it. We can't discount that. It was a brutal time, and killing a rival's child, especially a favored one, was a standard move in the political playbook.
But Wu turned that tragedy, whether it was real or manufactured, into a political weapon.
She did, and that's the key. Whether she committed the murder or simply capitalized on a terrible tragedy, the result was what mattered to her. The rumor solidified her position as the victim and Wang's as the villain. It was the final nail in the coffin for Empress Wang.
And things get very Game of Thrones very quickly after this. Gaozong promotes Wu to Empress. And what happens to her old rivals, Wang and the pure consort Xiao?
It's grisly. They were accused of witchcraft, which was a standard political weapon back then, deposed and thrown into prison. Later, on Wu's orders, they were executed.
Now, there's a legend about how they died.
Okay.
I've heard these stories about them being turned into human swine.
There is, but we need to be very careful of that one. The popular story, the one you hear a lot, is that their limbs were cut off and they were thrown into wine vats to prolong their suffering. That's the human swine torture.
Horrific.
It is. However, our best sources suggest the specific graphic detail might be a conflation. It might be later storytellers mixing Wu Zetian up with a different empress, Empress Liu from the Han dynasty, who lived centuries earlier and was famous for that specific cruelty.
So they're blending the stories to make Wu seem even more demonic.
It's very likely. But let's be clear, they were executed, and the sources say Wu was haunted by it.
Haunted literally, like she saw ghosts.
Allegedly. She believed their spirits were hunting her in the palace at Chang. She complained of them appearing in her dreams, disheveled and bloody. It's actually one of the main reasons she eventually convinced the emperor to move the entire court from the capital, Chang, to the eastern capital, Luoyang.
She moved the government to escape ghosts.
To escape her ghosts, yes.
So she's empress now. She has the title, she has the power, but she's not satisfied with just being the wife. We're moving into part 3, the two saints, because in the year 660, something happens to Emperor Gaozong.
Gaozong suffers a major health crisis. The records say he suffered from debilitating dizziness and vision loss. It was most likely a severe stroke or series of strokes, probably related to hypertension. He became incapacitated for long stretches.
And who steps in to handle the day-to-day business of running the empire?
Wu Zetian. But she doesn't just, sign a few forms. She effectively takes over the entire administration. She would sit behind a curtain or a screen during court sessions, literally ruling from the shadows.
So the officials would be unvesting the emperor.
But the decisions, the questions, the orders were coming from the woman behind the curtain. It got to the point where the court officials started calling them Sheng, the two saints.
Meaning they were co-rulers.
In title, perhaps. But in practice, she was driving the car. And this is where we see her start to reshape the government to fit her own ambitions, and also where we see her ruthlessness turn on her own family.
Yeah, let's talk about the family purges. Because usually when someone gets power, they elevate their family members to secure loyalty. Wu didn't exactly do that.
Well, she had a very complicated relationship with her relatives. Remember, her father was a merchant, and her mother, Lady Yang, had been snubbed by Wu's own half-brothers and cousins, the men of the family.
They looked down on her mom.
They did. They saw her as coming from a lower status. And when Wu got power, she remembered that disrespect. One by one, those male relatives were demoted, exiled, or worse.
So this was payback for how they treated her mom years earlier.
Absolutely. And then there's the incident with her own niece.
The Lady of Wei.
Yes. The niece was getting a little too close to the emperor, perhaps becoming a new favorite, so Wu had her poisoned. And then she blamed the tainted food on her cousins and had them executed for the crime.
2 birds, 1 stone.
A terrifyingly efficient move. It really reinforces that iron hammer mentality from the horse story. If you are a threat, if you do not submit, you get the hammer.
But, and here's the nuance we promised at the start, it wasn't just murder and palace intrigue, she was also governing.
Yes, it was policy. In 675, she submitted a document called the 12 Suggestions to Improve Governance. And these weren't the ravings of a madwoman. They were deeply considered progressive reforms.
What kind of things was she suggesting?
Well, for example, take the mourning period for parents. In strict Confucian society, if your father died, the mourning period was 3 years. If your mother died, it was shorter, it was unequal.
A reflection of their status.
Exactly. Wu changed the law, so the mourning period for a mother was equal to that of a father.
That sounds like a small ritual detail, but in China at the time, that's a huge symbolic shift.
It's massive. It was a direct legal challenge to the patriarchal structure of society. She was using policy to elevate the status of women. She also did things like add the Tao Te Ching to the university reading lists, broadening intellectual horizons beyond just the rigid Confucian classics.
So she's encouraging agriculture, she's reforming social norms.
She was actively reshaping society to create a world where a woman like her could rule. And while she was doing this, she was also eliminating anyone who could challenge her, which, tragically, included her own sons.
Let's get into that because it's so dark. She had 4 sons with Gaozong. The eldest, Crown Prince Li Hong, was by all accounts popular and capable.
He was, but he argued with her about policy. Specifically, he wanted her to release some of the political rivals she had imprisoned. He disagreed with her ruthlessness. Soon after one of these arguments, he died very suddenly.
Why is him?
Most historians, then and now, suspect poison. Then her second son, Li Xian, was made crown prince. He was also very bright, but he was eventually accused of treason when weapons were found in his palace. A setup. Almost certainly a setup. He was exiled and later forced to commit suicide.
It's a ruthless Darwinism within her own family. Only the son, who is completely subservient, will be allowed to survive.
It is. She was clearing the board of anyone with an independent mind. Which leads us to the moment where she stops pretending to be the helper, part 4, establishing the Zhou dynasty.
Emperor Gaozong finally dies in 683. Her third son, Zongzong, takes the throne. He lasts all of 6 weeks.
A new record, perhaps.
What did he do wrong?
He made the critical mistake of trying to act like a real emperor. He tried to appoint his father-in-law to a high position, a chancellor, without checking with mom first.
Big mistake.
Wu essentially saw this as a direct challenge. She convened the court and had him deposed for treason. 6 weeks. She replaces him with her youngest, most pliable son, Ruzong, but he was emperor in name only.
A puppet.
A virtual prisoner in the inner palace, who wasn't allowed to meet officials or make any decisions. Wu was the absolute, undisputed ruler.
And then, in the year 690, she decides to drop the charade completely.
The coronation. She forces Ruzong to abdicate the throne to her. She declares the end of the great Tang dynasty and the beginning of her own, the Zhou dynasty.
And she takes a new name, Wu Zhou. And I read that she actually created a new Chinese character for her name.
She did, a character that means something like light shining from the sky or sun and moon in the sky.
That is a power move. I'm not just taking the throne, I'm inventing language to describe how awesome I am.
The symbolism was everywhere. There was this parrot and cat pun that circulated among the people. Her surname, Wu, sounds very similar to the word for parrot. The royal family she just deposed, the Li family, their name sounds like wildcat.
So the cat eats the parrot, a political joke.
Right. People would joke about the cat eating the parrot to symbolize the struggle between the families, but Wu made sure the parrot was the one with the claws. And to secure this new dynasty, to make sure no cats were left, she unleashed a reign of terror.
Let's talk about the mechanics of this, because reign of terror is a phrase we hear a lot in history. How did she actually do it? What were the tools?
She constructed a state surveillance system that was terrifyingly effective. She empowered a secret police force, led by a group of cruel officials, most famously a man named Lai Yunchen.
And what did these guys do?
They were torturers, sadists, but she gave them a very specific and brilliant tool, the copper mailboxes.
The source mentions these. They were actual physical boxes in the capital.
Yes, 4 of them, with different slots. 1 slot for men recommending themselves for office, another for criticizing the government, another for reporting conspiracies and treason.
And anyone could use them.
Anyone. A peasant, a servant, a disgruntled neighbor, a rival official. You could drop a letter in there anonymously, accusing anyone of anything.
That is terrifying. It gamifies snitching. It turns the entire population into potential spies for the state.
It created an atmosphere of absolute paranoia. If you were a member of the old aristocracy, you couldn't trust your own servants. You couldn't trust your brother. Because if a letter with your name on it ended up in that copper box, Lai Yunshin's men would drag you to their special prisons.
And they had a manual, right, an instruction book on how to get confessions.
Yes, it was called the Manual of Accusation. It was a literal instruction book on torture. It detailed methods to break a person's will and extract a confession, regardless of their actual guilt.
And there were name techniques.
There were. The source mentions one called Dying Swine's Melancholy. We don't have the graphic specifics, thankfully, but the name itself implies a kind of prolonged, agonizing process designed to break the spirit to the point where the victim would admit to anything just to make it stop.
Okay, so this is the tyrant side of her in full view. She's purging her enemies through torture and paranoia. But I want to go back to the why. Was she just a sadist, killing random people for fun?
No. And this is the crucial expert nuance. While this was undeniably terrifying, there was a clear political purpose. She was targeting a very specific group, the Gaozong aristocracy.
Define that for us. Who were these people?
Imagine the landed gentry in Victorian England, or the old money families of Boston. These were the powerful clans from the region around the old capital, Chang'an. They had held power for centuries. They controlled the best land, the top army posts, the key court positions.
And they hated her.
They despised her. To them, she was a merchant's daughter, an upstart, a concubine who had bewitched 2 emperors, and worst of all, a woman who dared to sit on the dragon throne. They were the biggest threat to her new dynasty.
So by wiping them out with the terror, she was clearing the board.
Yes, she was systematically dismantling the old boys' club. And to replace them, she needed new people, loyal to her. This leads us to part 5, governance, religion, and society. Because her most lasting positive legacy is actually how she filled those empty government spots.
The civil service exams.
The Kiju. Now, the exams existed before her, but they were largely dominated by the rich and powerful. If you were from a noble family, you got the best tutors, you had the connections, you were almost guaranteed to pass.
It was a system that perpetuated itself.
Exactly. Wu Zetian reformed it. She opened the exams up to commoners and gentry from the rural North China Plain, areas outside the traditional power base. She made it about skill and knowledge. not family lineage.
She basically democratized the bureaucracy.
In a way, yes. She even introduced palace examinations at the very end of the process. She would sit on the throne and personally interview the final candidates herself.
Imagine the pressure. You walk in, you're a scholar from some tiny village, you passed all these tests, and now the lion stallion lady is staring at you, judging you.
Terrifying. But think about the result. She creates a whole new class of officials, the scholar officials. These guys owe everything to her. Their careers, their status, their wealth. It all comes from her, not from their grandfathers.
So they aren't loyal to the old aristocratic families. They're loyal to her personally.
Precisely. She replaced a hereditary oligarchy with a meritocracy that was dependent on the throne. It was a revolutionary shift in the power base of China, and it lasted for centuries after she was gone.
She also had to deal with the fact that, religiously and philosophically, she wasn't supposed to be there.
Confucianism is pretty strict about the whole men rule, women obey thing.
Very strict. It was a huge ideological barrier.
So how does she get around that?
She pivoted. She massively promoted Buddhism, which had been gaining popularity, and elevated it above Taoism, which had been the favored religion of the Tang family she deposed.
Okay, so she changes the state religion. But doesn't Buddhism also have patriarchal elements?
It does. There's a concept of the 5 impediments, which says women can't achieve certain high spiritual states or positions of power, including becoming a universal monarch.
So how did she get around that?
She found, or perhaps commissioned, a commentary on a Buddhist text called the Great Cloud Sutra.
Let me guess. It conveniently predicted a female ruler. Conveniently, yes.
Yeah.
This commentary predicted that a female deity, the Devi of pure radiance, would be reincarnated and would reign as a universal monarch, bringing peace and prosperity. Wu then had her supporters declare that she was the incarnation of Maitreya, the future Buddha who will come to save the world.
So she's not just an empress. She's a living god.
She's a living Buddha. She used religion brilliantly to bypass the Confucian rules. She essentially said, your patriarchal rules don't apply to me. I'm a divine being sent to rule.
Whatever works. And looking at the map, she wasn't just sitting in the palace praying and writing exams. The empire was growing under her rule.
It was. She was an aggressive commander-in-chief. She pushed the borders of the empire deep into Central Asia, retaking the 4 garrisons of Anxi.
Why was that area so important?
It controlled the Silk Road. Controlling the Silk Road meant controlling immense wealth from trade. She also fought major wars on the Korean peninsula against the kingdoms of Silla and Goguryeo. She was an expansionist.
And what about the economy back home?
She maintained the Juntian or equal field system. This was a complex land distribution system designed to ensure that farming families had land to till. This kept the tax revenue flowing steadily and the imperial granaries full. The population was relatively stable and content.
That's the great paradox of her reign, isn't it? If you were a high-ranking noble in the capital, she was your worst nightmare. You could be tortured and executed on an anonymous tip.
An existential threat.
But if you were a rice farmer in the provinces, she was actually a pretty great emperor who kept the taxes fair and the borders safe.
Precisely. For the average person, life was probably pretty good.
But, like all empires, the cracks started to show eventually. We moved to part 6, the fall and the legacy. And unfortunately, the story takes a turn and involves gigolos.
It does. We have to talk about the Zhang brothers.
Okay, set the scene for us. Wu is now in her 70s and 80s. She's old, she's ruled for decades, and she starts relying heavily on 2 young, handsome lovers, Zhang Yizi and Zhang Changzong.
These 2 were controversial. They were incredibly handsome, apparently great musicians, but also profoundly corrupt and arrogant. Because they were the Empress's favorites, they gained immense power.
They were the gatekeepers.
Exactly. They controlled all access to the aging Empress. Even the highest ministers in the government couldn't get an audience with her without going through the Zhang brothers first.
Why did she fall for them? Was she just a lonely old woman?
It's possible. She was isolated at the top for so long, but also politically, she might have seen them as useful. They had no independent power base. Their power came only from her favor. Unlike her sons or ministers, they couldn't betray her and start their own dynasty.
But they became a problem.
A huge problem. As she got older and sicker, she lost control of them. They started taking bribes, abusing their power, and alienating the entire court.
And this led to one last tragic family incident.
Yes. Her own grandson, Li Chengbrun, and her granddaughter were caught privately discussing the Zhang brothers, basically gossiping among themselves about how much influence these 2 guys had.
Just talking about it.
Talking. The Zhang brothers found out, ran to Wu, and claimed it was a conspiracy. And Wu, paranoid in her old age, ordered her own grandchildren to commit suicide
Over gossip.
over perceived disloyalty. But this was the breaking point. The court could handle the purges of the old aristocracy. They could even handle the secret police. But letting these two boy toys run the empire and kill the rightful heirs, that was too much. The loyalty she had built for decades started to evaporate.
So the coup finally happens.
In the year 705, Wu is very ill, bedridden. She's roughly 80 or 81 years old. A group of loyalist Tang generals and chancellors storm the palace.
Do they kill her?
No. They kill the Zhang brothers right there in the hallway outside her rooms. Then they go into her bedroom and force her to abdicate the throne.
And she just gives it up.
She's 80 and 6. She accepts it. The Tang dynasty is restored under her son, Gaozong, the same one she deposed for being incompetent all those years ago.
She dies a few months later. But her final act, her final edict from her deathbed, is really surprising. She asks to be stripped of the title Emperor.
Yes. She formally requests to be buried not as Emperor Wu Zhou of the Zhou dynasty, but as Empress Consort of the Tang dynasty, alongside her husband, Gaozong.
Why? After everything she did to get that title, why give it up at the very end? Was it humility? Regret?
That is the million-dollar question. It's unlikely to be regret. A more cynical and probably more accurate reading is that it was one last pragmatic political move.
How so?
If she died as a usurper emperor, the restored Tang court might have refused her an imperial burial. They might have just tossed her in an unmarked grave. By reverting to Empress Consort, the wife of Emperor Gaozong, she guaranteed her spot in the magnificent Qinling Mausoleum next to her husband for all eternity. She secured her legacy.
Which brings us right back where we started, to the wordless stele. We have this massive blank stone standing over her tomb. Why leave it blank?
There are three main theories, and I want to hear which one you buy. Theory 1. It's a boast. Her achievements were so vast, so unprecedented that no words could possibly contain them. It's her saying, I am beyond language. My deeds speak for themselves.
I'm too great for your adjectives. Okay. I could see that. What's theory 2?
Theory 2. She knew she was controversial. She knew the male Confucian historians who would write the official records hated her, so she left it blank intentionally to let future generations, to let us judge her. It's a challenge. You write my epitaph.
That's bold. That's very lion stallion.
And then there's theory 3. The Confucian scholars who took over after she died hated her so much that they simply refused to write anything. It was an act of silent protest. They couldn't praise her because she was a woman usurper, but they couldn't deface the monument of an imperial ancestor, so they just did nothing. An empty stone as the ultimate insult.
You know, I personally lean toward the second one. She was a woman who was obsessed with her legacy, with controlling the narrative. Leaving it blank is the ultimate power move. It forces us to keep talking about her, to keep debating her. 1,300 years later, we're filling it in right now.
I agree. It's a blank canvas that forces every generation to project its own values onto her. It's brilliant.
So let's wrap this up with a final verdict. Was she, the hen that crowed, a disaster for China? Or was she a visionary ruler?
The Confucian historians certainly saw her as a disaster, a violator of the natural and cosmic order, a cautionary tale. But if you look at the hard metrics, the expansion of territory, the stability of the economy, the creation of a meritocratic bureaucracy, she was an incredibly effective CEO.
She broke the glass ceiling.
She shattered it. She crushed the aristocracy that was holding China back and promoted talent from all walks of life. Yes, she had blood on her hands, lots and lots of it. But so did Emperor Taizong. So did nearly every great emperor in history.
That's the thing that sticks with me. And here's a thought for you to go on. We read about her strangling her daughter, poisoning her son, torturing her rivals, and it sounds absolutely monstrous.
It is.
But the source material also says she accepted words of righteousness and honored the upright. She would promote officials who stood up to her and disagreed with her if she thought they were talented and right.
It's a fundamental duality.
So here's the question. If a male emperor had done exactly what she did, killed his brothers to secure the throne, purged the old lazy nobles with a secret police, expanded the borders, and stabilized the economy, would he be remembered as a monster? Or would he just be another Emperor Wu the Great?
And how much of her evil reputation is simply because she dared to sit on the dragon throne as a woman?
It forces you to ask whether we judge female power by a different, harsher standard than male power. Power is rarely clean. Wu Zetian showed us just how messy and how effective it can be.
A lesson for the ages.
And on that note, we'll leave you to fill in the blank stele yourself. Thanks for diving deep with us.
My pleasure. See you next time.